Welcome back. We're live from the Care Show in Birmingham. I always forget because there's one in London as well. I forget the Birmingham, London, but we're in Birmingham, and we're sponsored.
I was in London last night.
You were in London, yeah.
Feels like
another event, backs and forwards,
Bankers.
Yeah,
it was Shawbrook Bank last
night. Well,
we're
going to talk about money.
We are.
We'll talk about money. But thanks again for sponsoring. So Lucy's the Managing Director of Cornerstone Care Solutions, who are our sponsor today. And this is Lucy's conversation.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk. Do you want to? Let's just start from afresh.
Yep.
Who you are, what you do.
Okay. So I'm Lucy Corner. I'm the Managing Director of Cornerstone Care Solutions. We have been going since 2013, so it's quite a while now. I feel old. I started off as a nurse, so my background was working in the NHS. I did acute care, A&E, EAU, which is emergency assessment. Really enjoyed that. I quite like fast-paced sort of thinking on your feet sort of work.
Were you a mean nurse or a nice nurse?
I was a fun nurse. I think I didn't really fit in well in the NHS because I found everything really quite interesting, and I was bouncy and I was young, and I think I used to wind up my managers quite a lot because I would be singing to myself on the ward, or find things funny that I probably shouldn't find funny. And one of my managers once told me that I treated my job as a hobby, which I don't know if that's a compliment or not.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It depends. It depends how jaded they were, I suppose, at that point. Yeah.
I don't think she liked me very much. But
too enthusiastic, I suppose.
Yeah, I think so. But also, I know I would, if I was working with me now as I was then, I would annoy me.
Yeah.
So, I was annoying and had a lot of life skills and stuff to develop. So it's good to look back and think that.
So nurse in the NHS.
Yep.
So you just sort of trained out of uni, did that? Or
I went to uni to be a nurse and I did that at Bournemouth Uni, which was good. Then I was a nurse in the NHS for like 6 years. My other half then I met him, but we were living separately. And then I moved to Bristol because he's in the army, so he was based closer to Bristol. And I did some Googling and looked at nurse leadership positions. I'd volunteer in the Army Cadet Force, quite an interest in leadership. And I decided to move to Bristol to be closer to him, and ended up looking at care home management jobs. And I saw that there was things in there like HR, environmental stuff, law, quite like, negotiations and relationship building, managing a team of people. I thought there'd be quite a few different facets to that I wouldn't otherwise get to do in the NHS. So I applied for a job doing that and went straight in as a care home manager for a 48-bedded nursing home. And I was the youngest home manager.
Straight in from being a nurse. This is quite interesting. I think we always, when we make recruitment content for care homes, we just make that pitch to nurses to say the relationships you build in care are much more interesting. You get to work with people on a long-term basis, right? If you're in an ICU,
completely,
and they're in and out in a couple of days,
you might see them for a few days, and then in a care home you get to know them.
Yeah.
So the whole thing of person-centered care is much more kind of in depth in a care home. You can really give a service to somebody that they want or need. So I found it really difficult. The first kind of year was definitely one of the hardest
steep
employment
learning curve, I imagine.
Yeah, massively.
From being a nurse in the NHS
and
to
also
running a private business, right?
Remember as well, I was quite jovial, and I was enjoying myself a bit as well. So I was having a lot of fun. But I was the youngest home manager for Four Seasons Healthcare at the time. So not only was I really young, but going into a job I had not really much idea of. I had been a carer in a care home before, so I had an idea of how care homes ran, but obviously that's massively different to running a care home and doing everything. So I did that for a couple of years, really enjoyed it. Four Seasons have got great management information that they give to their managers, so I learned a lot about looking at your income and your cash flow and all of that kind of stuff, so that was really helpful.
And I think as well, people underestimate the idea that like a 48-bedded care home, it's like a £2 million a year business, right?
Yeah.
Like they're big businesses,
yeah.
And you go from like managing zero budgets at all as a nurse in the NHS to suddenly you're in charge of this. And again, I'd advocate the idea that like social care can promote you quite quickly if you're enthusiastic and good. And there's a lot of examples around of young managers, and it can be well paid, a management position in a care home. It's a lot of responsibility, but they're big businesses. It
was a lot of responsibility, and I grew up really quickly doing that, and it definitely, made me look at how I presented myself and how I manage people. I already ran a cadet unit, and I did a lot of work in cadets, so I had a lot of background in leading people already. I also then went to study a Master's in Leadership and Management part-time at the University of the West of England. So I had that, which I've always been interested in leadership. So that I did that after I left, actually. I moved on and ended up doing some consulting work. And I work for a company called Gold Care Future Management, who manage insolvent care homes and do a lot of turnaround. So this was quite a while ago, back when there were other companies like Careport around, and I worked with them for a few years, really enjoyed it. Each home was completely different. You had to problem solve, find the issues, be it environmental, finance, staffing, culture, all sorts of different problems, work out what the problems were, and then put a system in place to fix them. And then at one point, somebody that I'd worked with for Gold Care, so Gold Care liquidated, I went back to doing consulting. The owner of Gold Care decided to move on, and I think he wanted to retire and go to Portugal or wherever it was. And I decided to go back to doing my consulting. I was quite happy, having a bit of a break. And then an insolvency practitioner I'd had a really good relationship with rang me and said, there's this group of care homes going into administration, and we really like the way that you do things. Could you come and do like a review of the homes, give us a report, and then depending on what happens, we'll contract you to run them. So I did, and it went really well. We traded them for 18 months. We managed to get an embargo lifted within 11 weeks, started filling the beds, got a really good relationship with the local authority. I think the home was valued at something like 900,000 bricks and mortar, which was in negative equity, and then it sold for something in the region of 4.3 million after 18 months of us trading it.
Wow.
So the bank were over the moon because they got their money back. The lawyers involved in the sale were impressed, so were the accountants, and I just got so many referrals from that things blew up, and that was the start of Cornerstone then.
Nice, okay. So all started from that sort of. It's amazing, isn't it? You can normally track back your sort of whole business origin story to like a couple of conversations, like where that, and it all leads out from that point. So we fast forward to today. That's kind of what Cornerstone does, pretty broadly, is looks after homes that are in administration, right? And it's a bit more than that, and we can
that's one of the things we do. But we fully trade homes all the way through to doing policies, procedures, staffing reviews, fee reviews. We look at dependency tools and check that they're in line with the staffing levels. We often come across homes where, especially if you have a nursing home that's run by a non-nurse or the operations manager is not a nurse, you can find that some really strong nurses demand more nurses. And then the organisation hasn't really got a plan for putting that in place, and they'll agree with that nurse even though they don't really have that requirement. So recently we worked in a care home that had 8 nursing residents, and each day they had 3 nursing staff on, which they didn't need. Yeah. So we were able to save them quite a lot of money by assessing the needs of the site. Yeah.
So from your perspective, do you prefer to get hold of homes, or maybe this is a question that would come from sort of an administrator or a bank, what are like kind of the early warning signs, or obviously if the home's in administration, I suppose that makes things a bit more complicated, and you can help before, is there a typical set of warning signs 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks before that a bank might be looking out for, or like in a minute,
banks don't often know. So it's more a case of, if I was in there consulting or if I was a member of staff, I would probably spot something that could trigger to me that there are issues with the finances. So there's not really hard signs until the line's drawn, and there could be different situations as well, which mean if you just can't get refinanced, it just happens in one day, and there's no, there might be money in the bank. It's just that they can't refinance, and therefore there's a dead end.
So from the bank's perspective, there's not normally a run-up to the problem because they're not because there's too many
Right.
organisations they look after to specifically keep an eye on each individual one.
Yeah.
So I suppose from that perspective.
But some of the early warning signs would be things like staff will notice that they get phone calls from suppliers asking for bills to be paid.
Yeah.
So a big one is if direct debits get cancelled and the provider's trying to save some money, like they might notice there's a cash flow issue. So they might start cancelling some direct debits. They might try and delay some payments or come up with ways of saving money. So some of those things are reducing the training that's provided to staff. They might stop training altogether. So that's a cost that they think they don't need to do. But that obviously impacts on quality. So you end up seeing that come through with accidents and incidents and some mistakes.
So that would be along the lines of sort of trading while insolvent. So do you think in most cases that people who own the homes know or don't know? Do you see, and I suppose that's
it's kind of a 50-50. Yeah. Some of them know and they think that they're kind of holding back the purse strings to stop things escalating. But then they look at the short term and not necessarily the longer term. Others are completely ignorant to it. I've had people ring me and say, oh, we've just paid payroll and we realise there's not enough money in the bank to pay payroll next month. What do we do? And that's kind of a bit more, what, have you not been looking at your bank?
You've got 28 days to sort it out, it's fine.
Yeah, so
an owner
spectrum
of a home could, so maybe someone owns one home or a small group of homes.
Yeah.
They might look to appoint someone like you before it gets really bad, because actually that's
sometimes
probably a better time to do it.
And often it's when they've had a really bad CQC inspection.
Yeah.
So we do a lot of challenges of reports, or we go in evidence improvements. Sometimes there's a conflict of interest, or like the inspector used to know someone in the service and the provider's a bit scared of CQC and doesn't want to raise it and cause a problem. But if they don't say anything and they accept a really negative report, then that's jeopardises their business.
The language you use is professionally pushing back? Is that what do you say? Yeah.
And sometimes formal complaints.
Yeah.
There's a scale of things. Sometimes if it really is an issue and you've tried to raise it and it's not worked, then you do have to escalate things. And it works. We've done it both ways. We wouldn't automatically start with the most harsh option. We try and speak to them first and get a little bit of understanding backwards and forwards, but also empower the provider that they can stick up for themselves. There's a lot of providers out there that think the local authorities and CQC, etc., have got the jeopardy, and they can't challenge them. And if they did challenge them, they'd either get a bad inspection or they'd remove their contracts. So we go in, we help challenge them respectfully. So the reports, sometimes they maybe haven't got all the right evidence, or the provider didn't evidence, or they didn't ask for the right evidence. So maybe we can find some extra stuff to give to CQC to say, actually your report's not completely correct. But also some inspectors will use language or put things in a report that don't actually mean what they're trying to say they mean. So I used to be a Manx CQC inspector. I have the benefit of having some of that training. And inspectors are not allowed to use their opinion. They have to use fact. So if they say, that something is something, but it's an opinion, then you can challenge that. And especially if you can evidence the opposite, like you've got a call bell log that says exactly how long the call bells have been ringing for, and they happen to write in there that they've heard a call bell ringing for a certain amount of time, then you can challenge that and actually give them the facts potentially. So we're often introduced when there's a poor CQC inspection and an embargo put on the service, and that will then impact the finances. So the provider might phone us at that point to help us challenge the inspection report, or when the occupancy starts to drop, then they'll contact us because they realise they need some help.
Well, I suppose an embargo can be pretty devastating for an organisation whose maybe 80 to 90% of the money that they're bringing in is from the local authority. It's interesting. Let's talk a little bit more about local authority and how to manage that relationship. And I think you've got that right in the idea that, as your primary customer, you're scared of upsetting them and creating that wrong thing. But is there sort of how do you normally approach it? What's a sort of good tactful way of?
Well, first of all, having and building a good relationship from the first place is the best thing to do. So, to be open and honest with the local authority, to get to know the team, understand their background. A big part of trust and leadership is about knowing where someone comes from and what their key kind of focus is. So you get some people in a local authority that are social workers, they come from a different perspective as somebody who might have been a nurse, or they might have been a care home manager in the past. So knowing the people that work in your local authority is the first thing, and then trying to engage them in maybe inviting them into the home so they understand a bit more about the ethos. And all of that preparatory work is better than trying to fix something afterwards when there's an issue. And then hopefully if there is an issue, like there's some kind of conflict, people will listen. You can have an open conversation rather than it being on the back foot straight away.
Yeah, and I suppose especially if something you can really clearly set out that is like an opinion that's incorrect or a conflict of interest that might be that the people in charge might not be aware of, that
well, exactly.
Make sure you highlight those.
You've just reminded me of an example where we ran a care home that was in administration, and the head of safeguarding was also one of the commissioners, so they had a lot of power against that service in, upholding safeguarding issues, but also then stopping admissions. And it was only after 6 months that one of the staff members made a flippant comment about, that person doesn't like the home because their father died in that care home 6 months earlier. We obviously didn't know anything about this because we hadn't got anything to do with the home prior to our appointment.
Yeah.
But when we knew that and we went to his boss, they didn't realise that that person's father had died in the home, and therefore there was obviously some emotional kind of involvement in that.
And I suppose that would have, if is that, do you now procedure that type of thing? Is there a way you can do that? Sort of check surnames of people and stuff?
Well,
I suppose it's a bit of a freak occurrence, isn't it?
It is
really?
a freak occurrence, but you'd be surprised
Something
how many people move between organisations as well. So you often have someone who used to be in the local authority in the same area and then moves into CQC, or used to work. Again, we've got an issue at the moment where a provider employed a person as a manager and then they moved into CQC as an inspector and has some kind of sway over that service. So not necessarily the direct inspector, but might have been friends of the inspector that's coming out to that service. So there can be some indirect links as well that can be explored. But they're normally highlighted to us. It's very difficult for us to find them. But sometimes we come across them, like I mentioned.
Let's talk about cash flow. So I enjoy a cash flow document. How much I enjoy it depends on what the numbers say. One thing I find difficult about cash flow documents is, so for my business, I use a spreadsheet which I've sort of designed myself and adds up. And I remember one situation where one of the formulas had got deleted and dropped off. And I was like, this looks really good, really good. And I was like, oh wow, numbers are looking good, it's all good. And then sort of, a few hours later realised, okay. So making sure you lock those to not mess them up. But it's a massive part of every business.
It's a huge issue.
So how do you approach that? What do you do? Do you use particular bits of software? How do you personally like to deal with it? Do you just get in there, get all the numbers and put it in a spreadsheet? How do you work with it?
Yep, so accounting software is best, like you've mentioned. Spreadsheets work as well. But the one most important thing is having an admin that really understands the different fee structures in the services that they're working in. So using care homes as an example, it can be really complex. You can have 2 or 3 people contributing to the same person's fees. So you could have a private top-up, you can have a local authority rate.
Nursing bursary.
And then FNC on top, which is the funded nursing contribution.
And then they might spend money in the home as well, right? If you've
completely. So they might have their hair done, or they might have chiropody appointments, they might get a paper. All of those things are billed separately. And then on top of that, if their care needs become more acute, they might end up being eligible for continuing healthcare, CHC, and local authorities and the NHS don't tend to talk to each other. So if that happens, sometimes the local authority just stop paying, and then CQC don't start paying until the care home waves at them or shouts for it. So if you haven't got an administrator that knows exactly what's going on in the home, and they're not tracking who's being paid for by what the price is, you can end up with some pretty big cracks opening up, and then a lot of money falling through.
How big a problem is underbilling? So you
massive. I think even good care homes are not very good at it. So you need a really efficient team to keep an eye on that kind of thing. But 9 times out of 10, if there's an inadequate care home, there's all sorts of problems with the cash flow.
Yeah.
And, there's multiple issues that add up onto that, because they'll be using agencies, so they'll have more invoices that they've got to check and process. And, depending on how many agency shifts they're using, each day invoice has to be looked at, each timesheet has to be looked at. There are some agencies that will take advantage of some struggling businesses and send extra staff, knowing that they probably haven't got the chance to go through the timesheets and overpay. We've come across some issues.
I mean, you're going to be processing for a 50-bedded care home hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of invoices and bills to pay every month, right?
And you have to prioritise them, because with the cash flow situation, if you are struggling, you need to look at which things need to be paid first, and who shouts the loudest. But also things like an agency. If you don't pay the agency, they will ring the council and tell the council that you're not paying them, or they'll be the first people that will start the process to wanting to put in a winding up petition. So there are certain providers that, again, going back to this, what's the flag for a failing care home? Agencies will normally get paid, but some other services are the ones that don't get paid, and because they don't shout so much, or they can get away with delaying the payments longer, they'll be the first ones that an owner decides not to pay.
What do you think sort of best practice around keeping on top of that would, when you worked at Four Seasons, for example, a while ago, I suppose they had a central system. If you're running one care home or two care homes, does the manager look after those things?
So normally the administrator will do that. Yeah. Depending on the size of the home, you might have an administrator and a receptionist, or you might have two administrators and they kind of do both. Four Seasons, the home that I used to be in, I had an administrator, and she used to do the payroll, she used to do all the invoicing, and she used to put everything onto the system, and then the system was collated centrally, so they had a set of accountants working at HQ. So that made sure that they kept track of certain things, and it was also how they developed their management information, which leads me on to talk about management information, because a lot of providers that we work with don't necessarily collate and manage that. They might do it quarterly.
Monthly, or
it should be monthly. Yeah, it should be monthly. The best information is monthly, but a lot of people leave it too late, and they might do it monthly, but at the end of the quarter that they get it monthly, so they can't make any changes that affect the rest of that quarter. Yeah. So it's really important for them to have a system in place, all set up, and so they can monitor that.
Okay, let's stop talking about money, and let's talk about first things you do when you go into a home that I guess either you've been appointed by an administrator, or you're going, there's a problem and you're going in to fix it.
Yep.
What's the first day look like?
Manic. I mean, you imagine, I often use the analogy, if you imagine that you were given a care home and somebody just gives you the keys, and you've got no idea.
Is this actually happen? Because there's probably about 15 keys, right? Does someone come and sort of jangle them?
Well, normally it's a door code.
Door code, okay, fine.
So there isn't really a bunch of keys.
Keys would be fun.
You might have drug keys and an office key, or like the safe key. The safe key is a good one to have, actually. If you lose that, there's a problem.
Yeah.
So I
feel like that's quite a poignant moment of a handover, and I suppose of the key or something. Yeah, and just picturing it in my head, drawing a picture. Anyway,
it's not really defined, because you just turn up and then obviously the staff are like, there's loads of people here in suits. What's going on? So it can be quite stressful for the staff and residents, because a bunch of people turn up they've never seen before, and they're waving a bit of paper saying, we're now taking over your care home. So from that perspective, it's a bit stressful.
Won't know until you turn up?
No.
No, okay, wow.
No, sometimes the owner might have said something to them that it's brewing, or, they might have had a little tiny bit of notice. Maybe the manager's been told that something's going to happen, but most times they're not expecting
don't
it.
Know. So you knock on the door, present them a legal document that says...
The first kind of couple of hours is a little bit slow, because we have to wait for the appointment documents to be in place, and, we need to speak to people so they understand what's going on. Then we really get into the nitty gritty, and the first thing we look for is any risk. So we're looking at what the highest needs all of the residents have got, or the service users, or it might be a home care agency or domiciliary care, it might be care at home. So we look at the care needs of those individuals, and we check that we've got the right equipment, the right medication, the right training, the right number of staff. We do a really quick assessment on, are these people safe here? Because if they're not, we need to do something about that urgently. And I haven't come across a point where I've been really, really worried yet.
Yeah.
It's been a while, so
Yeah.
we've been doing this quite a long time. I've never walked in and really thought, oh my gosh, what do we do?
Yeah.
But
because I suppose most people that work in care are there to make
They
people
are, yeah.
safe, and they care about people.
Yeah.
You know, and they're not intentionally being
Exactly,
bad. You know, they're
exactly.
just circumstances.
So
and
most
not
of the
as-
time, there is the right equipment. People
Yeah.
have the right intentions. Things are good. We also then need to check things like doors, security.
Yeah.
Many care homes are old school kind of care homes
Yeah.
where, I mean, we had one recently we took over in January, and there was no lock or handle or anything to the front door. So
You're like ringing up the locksmiths to get them in.
you
to
could
fix
literally
it,
just
yeah.
walk in the home at any time
Wow.
that you wanted to,
Yeah.
including in the middle of the night, which I find that a bit odd that the staff weren't worried about somebody
Yeah.
walking around the home at midnight, but there was no lock on the door, and it was just anyone could come in at any point, and there was no way of securing the home. So,
And I suppose anyone can leave at any point, right? Which is not normally.
and that
a
was
risk.
another issue, yeah.
Yeah.
So again, you need to be checking for those things, looking at window restrictors, again, mainly starting with the top floor.
Yeah.
And then making sure that we fix anything like that. We've come across homes where basement doors are not locked, and there's obviously a set of stairs the other side. So we immediately run around the home and have a look at any immediate
Yeah.
risks that we can see. Stairs that might
yeah.
not have barriers to them, things like that.
So, and that I suppose in that case is because the bank or the administrator is sort of taken over. You are like going in to do a massive risk assessment
Yeah.
to say, are there any blaring problems that might create like lawsuits really quickly or anything like that? So that's the first thing. And then sort of what happens in the first few weeks.
So then we look at the staff. So then we look at, have we got enough staff? Are they trained? And we also look through their files to check that they've got DBSs, their employment records are all in place.
Yeah.
We've come across
That's
people...
the bit Charlie likes, the governance.
She loves it. She is obsessed with the governance side
Yeah.
of things, and making sure that we've come across people with stuff on their DBS that would mean they shouldn't be working in care homes,
Yeah.
and we find it and think, now we've got to
Okay.
manage this. And also we come across care homes where there's people on sponsored licenses, and we need to make sure that they have a right to work, that the licenses are all up to date, and we have to tell the Home Office as well,
Yeah.
of an appointment. So there's a process of things that we check. We also, with the risk side of things, we look at stock. So I mentioned medications and stock and clinical supplies, but we also have to check there's food. So
Yeah.
we'll often have to go out and buy food if
Pop to a Booker or Tesco's
yeah.
or something like that. Yeah.
And if the bank account's frozen, then we'll
Yeah.
have to go and buy that or order it on Tesco delivery,
Yeah.
and then set up a new system for that to happen going forward. But yeah, it's
Interesting.
quite manic
So-
the first couple of
I
weeks.
can
It's
imagine,
very busy.
Yeah, so it must be really interesting. So obviously, that's a part of what you do as an organisation, and it's a really important thing. But we've talked before about you've got a load of other different types of services that you offer. Something that really stuck out to me when we were chatting yesterday was about occupancy rates and like sort of consulting on that side of things, and actually going into organisations and quite quickly being able to identify you've got X resource here, X space here. If you do this and that, suddenly you open up a whole new branch of a contract from the ICB or from the local authorities. So you want to talk a bit about that?
Sure. So one of the things we did recently, we had a group of care homes that was training in administration. We did a project, or Charlie did a project on speaking to the local authority on what needs they had. We had a care home which had an empty floor, and we were able to use that as a specific certain mental health unit. And Charlie was able to get a block bed booking with that local authority that meant even when the beds were empty that they would be being funded. And that really, did wonders for the finances of the care service.
Yeah.
So we can often have that conversation with councils. We know a lot of them now because we've been around a while, so we know the people to reach out to. We'll speak to them and ask them what their needs are. But we can also look at the building and see how it would fit. So if there is a secure 10-bed unit already there, then why not use it?
Yeah.
It might be that a small edit could be made to make that more useful.
Yeah, movable wall, change of a door, access.
Exactly, put a code on a door,
Yeah.
and as long as there's a social area and there's, a way to provide food and a lounge or whatever.
So if
it
you're
can
running a home or a group of homes and you feel like you've got untapped resources, if your occupancy is not, at 95%, give you a call, and there's probably something that you can do to to identify.
Well, we take a
some
lot of
positive
pleasure
areas,
in people will say, oh, we've already done everything we think we can do.
Yeah.
And we'll go in and say, well, actually, fees can be increased here, occupancy can be increased here.
Yeah.
They might have, very often they've got bedrooms being used as storage. It's
Yeah.
a bedroom. Put it back to being a bedroom. They might have a bedroom that's been made into a staff room for the staff, comfort, when actually there's an area somewhere else that's not quite so nice, or it's at the back of the home or on the first floor, but use that and utilise the bedrooms for extra occupancy. And then even down to suppliers, using cheaper suppliers, using suppliers that have got better invoicing agreements, so you can manage the cash flow better.
Yeah.
So they invoice for 30 days, for example, and don't chase you and whatnot. So you've got a bit more time to pay. And again, we find a lot of providers sign up to a regular payment for something that they're not using or they're not utilising, and they kind of forget that it's a direct debit and it's just been coming out. So again, we can have a look at everything.
Right,
Well, yeah, everyone's probably in the same boat.
Yeah.
But in a care home, we can sit down and really look at
really
actually
come through
these things can.
And I suppose
can
that
help.
the advantage that you've got is the experience that you've had as an organisation, going to like multiple tens of hundreds of homes, speaking to, if you go and work with Devon, there's another home, you'll know, I know that person in the local authority, actually the rates here are that, and so you've got that sort of insight that if you own a couple of homes in a regional area, you might not really be aware of, because I suppose you can go out of region as well, can't you? If you say, I know in the next county over they're desperate for XYZ, and they're just not going to know.
And it works both ways as well, because we'll often be appointed on a home and the people in the council know us. We did one recently, and 2 people on the call had worked on 2 different jobs with us. One of them was in a different council, but she'd moved. And we had this conversation to say, this care home's gone into administration and this is what it means. The CIW inspector assumed immediately that administration meant liquidation and was panicking, thinking, oh my gosh, it's going to close.
Yeah.
That means we've got to move everyone. So I was trying to calm everyone down on the call, and 2 of the people that we'd worked with before, one of them said, oh, listen, I've worked with Lucy before, it's all fine, let her explain. She's got this under control, we really won't need to worry. And it was so useful to have somebody advocate at that point. And the first lady, we hadn't done a job for or with for 12 years. And I was quite amazed she recognised me, to be honest, because I didn't recognise her. But it was really useful.
You do that every day, right? But it's a pretty dramatic moment for the people involved.
Yeah.
But
it can cause a lot of problems, because if they don't understand the difference between those 2 things, and it's the same with the staff, if they don't understand it, they might go and look for another job. If all the staff do that, the service will close because there'll be no staff running it. Same as if the local authority don't educate their staff on what insolvency is, or if a liquidation is different to an administration or a trading administration, then sometimes the social workers will start trying to place people elsewhere as well. Yeah. So you end up with
actually at that point you really need them to be placing,
and you need them to be, we don't necessarily, if it's a terrible home or, it's got bad inspection, we don't expect them to be filling the beds really quickly. We want them to, and we want to prove to them that we're happy with the home ourselves, and then advocate for filling the beds. So on day 1, I'm not going to walk into a home and say, please fill the beds, because I'm putting my name to something that I don't know.
To get the locksmith in first, don't you, really?
Exactly. I need to make sure they've got all the right stuff and everything's in place, and the staff, and I trust the staff as well, because you could have staff that don't really know what they're doing, and the last thing I want to do is bring in new people with a different need than they're used to caring for. So we manage that, and we build the reputation with that council as quick as we can, and then hopefully they'll start giving us admissions. But the one thing we don't want to happen is for the council to start moving people, and that's not just for finance reasons, that's because the residents have been there a while. A lot of these people know the residents, the staff. They're really comfortable. This is their home. They could have been there for 10, 20 years. The last thing we want to do is disrupt them and them living in their environment. So,
interesting. Anything else you want to cover? Anything else you want to talk about? Any of the other different services you do? Obviously, there's off camera you can't see this, but there's a big list of the services that Cornerstone do on the wall over there.
There's a list on the wall.
Any other areas you want to cover in that?
We do anything. So we often get asked, can you do this or can you do that? And we already do it, or we specify the way that we manage something that suits that particular service. So a lot of times a service has a certain need and it needs to be done in a way that suits them, not a blanket kind of one size fits all. So a lot of the time we'll be looking at things like strategy, governance. We do a lot of talking to ops teams and the overarching teams above the managers on how to risk manage across settings. So Charlie does a lot of that work with safeguardings and governance to make sure that people, especially when they're growing quite quickly, it's very difficult to grow a business fast. Obviously, if you take on a group that's already a well-knit and an established group, that's slightly different. But we've come across providers where they buy one care home here, one care home here, and they've all got different systems. They might have different care planning systems. They might have different accounting systems. Yeah. And rather than align them before moving on, they bolt more on. Yeah. And then a little bit further down the line, they realise that actually this is really difficult to manage and we didn't know this, we didn't know that. So we've come across nursing homes that don't actually employ any nurses.
Okay.
Which
seems a bit contradictory, but yeah.
Well, Charlie's phone call to me that day was pretty interesting. Yeah. But yeah, they had a care home up the road that had nurses, and they thought
just
that
sort of shipped them over from that. Yeah,
that would work.
But I suppose the advantage of running more than one home is that in theory you get economies of scale across across savings of sharing resources,
sharing resources homes, and expertise,
team members, things like that.
Yeah, and often you get a home manager that's really good at one thing, and you can get them to go and help. So one thing Four Seasons did that was really good. When I was a home manager there, was each manager had a different interest and a different sort of skill. So I'm really good at remembering policies and procedures, probably much to my team's dismay.
Bit weird, isn't it?
It is a bit weird. And someone said I have photographic memory, but to me that's like visionary. You have to see it.
Yeah, you have to
but I do have a great memory, and so if there was any disciplinary or any HR thing or a policy thing, they would ring me and say, what do I do here? Because, and which policy is it?
Policy 7BA.
Exactly.
Says da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah. And then there'd be another manager that was really good at schmoozing the staff. Yeah. So she had a great way of getting her bank staff to backfill the gaps in someone else's home. So we'd phone her and say, I'm really struggling covering Saturday night with a nurse, and she'd convince one of her nurses to come and do that. Yeah. So using the skills and the strengths in the team really, really helps.
Lovely. Well, I have asked you the final question before.
Yeah, you have.
Yeah, I have. So we could cover that.
Well, Charlie said actually afterwards, we were talking about this after that conversation, and she said that I should have said that I like jammy Dodgers. So you might as well ask the question first, actually, because
so if you're a biscuit, what type of biscuit would you be?
So my original answer was jammy Dodgers, still is, but I said because I'm jammy. Charlie said it's because I'm sweet in the middle, but I'm hard on the outside.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if she means I'm hard as in strict, or I come across hard. Maybe we need to get her to verify what she means by that. What was it? Hard in what way, though? Oh, I appear hard. So you don't think I actually am. That's good. So there we are. So I appear hard on the outside. But I can be quite feisty like I was this morning if I get wound up.
Well, thank you. We're going to swap seats, and you're going to talk to Hillary, from it. So we'll be back in a minute. And you can run, interview, but just have a chat with Hillary.
I thought you were going to ask some questions with your little mic. Or
I might do. I'll sit in the audience and I'll drink my coffee because I have only drunk half of it so far.
Oh, and, it'll be all warm.
So I'll have a chill over there and I'll listen in.
You have worked hard, to be fair.
I might holler things from the side, but sit down and have a chat with Hillary. So Hillary's from
Leonard Curtis.
Yeah, and what's the relationship between Cornerstone and Leonard Curtis?
So I've worked with Hillary lots over a long period of time. So the first care home that I ran for Cornerstone back when I mentioned, Hillary actually worked for that insolvency practice there. So we worked on that job together, and then in the meantime we've worked in a few, and she's moved on from that company, but we've stayed in touch because we work in a really similar way, and our teams do actually. So our team complements their team pretty well, so when we work together.
That's right. Well, We'll go offline for a second, come back, and then you'll be in the seat.
Cool.
So, all right, lovely. We'll be back.
I feel like I'll be in charge.
Yeah, you will. Well, I mean,
I like
you will
it.
Be, yeah.
Do I get to do the 3, 2, 1 thing?
You can do it. Yeah, Chris will do that for you. So, and you can do the little getting
I'll do
ready
my
jiggle.
little-
Yeah.
Okay,
Right.
cool. I'll be York for a minute.
We'll be back in a minute or so.